Joining us now to discuss the political headlines is Scottie Nell Hughes, political commentator and strategist and former Trump surrogate, and Robert Patillo, Democratic strategist. Robert, let's start with that image in that video that we saw of the president hogtied in the back of that pickup truck. The response from the Biden administration and what they're calling this, do you think that this further just draws the line between the two?
Well, I think this goes across party lines. This speaks to exactly where our politics are today. We can think back to the Kathy Griffin photo shoot during the Trump administration where she was holding President Trump's severed head, for example. We've gotten to a place of caustic politics where we no longer talk about political issues. We no longer talk about the candidates' positions on school choice or their positions on education or their positions on health care. It's all about personal attacks and drumming up each other's bases. And I think that we are in a very wrought political time currently that we haven't seen since the 1960s, where you have plots to kidnap the governor of Michigan, plots to kidnap the governor of Kentucky, where we're seeing vigilante justice taking place nationwide, and both political parties need to be working to tamp these things down because we see democracies backsliding across the globe into authoritarianism, and we don't want to see that to happen to the shining city on the hill that is America. We have to stop this constant push towards political violence and reestablish our democratic norms.
Scottie, same question to you. I mean, he just listed several incidents of the past few years, including this hogtied image. What's your reaction? This undercurrent of not just political violence, but it being okay, it being mainstreamed in a way. Do you agree with that assessment, and what do we do?
Well, I don't think that it's okay. I think the average American looks at any of this violence that's being promoted, like Robert said, accurately by both sides of the aisle, and they have no taste for it. They don't like this. This is what makes people not like politics. And as Robert correctly assessed, it's distracting us from the issues. I mean, we're dealing with issues. We're talking about this rather than talking about the policy points of what both President Biden and former President Trump would do if they were reelected in the next 4 years. None of us could probably go through their agenda points based on what they've said on this election year. And I think that's it's a disservice to the American people that we are getting so distracted. I almost call it a carrot and stick routine, trying to get headlines. People the media that are promoting these kinds of stories, they're trying to get headlines rather than actually let's get to the meat of the situation of what both men stand for, what their political parties stand for, because that's ultimately what the voters are looking for when they go to cast their vote in November for the next president.
Scottie, just a follow-up on that, though. You use the we, and I think that's a little disingenuous a little bit. This imagery is coming from one particular side, and it's not Joe Biden. Yes, I remember the Kathy Griffin image, but one difference is Kathy Griffin's never been president of the United States. And in a post-1-6 country, when we've all seen what this kind of language can do, what it can drum up, the death that it can lead to, I mean, Donald Trump is more part of that conversation than other politicians. Do you really think it's all equal?
I understand what you're saying, but realize it wasn't just Kathy Griffin. There was Robert De Niro, Snoop Dogg, Johnny Depp. There was endless amounts of Hollywood, which is basically a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party and for a lot of the pop culture that is a reflection on them, that did numerous attacks when Donald Trump was president. Where was the outrage then? So it is on both sides of it. Now, granted, you have Donald Trump put this out on his social media. Once again, is Donald Trump controlling his social media exclusively? I don't know. We have seen this fake disdain in the past, and obviously Lowe's staffers, we don't know the whole story on it. That being said, obviously nobody really cares for this type of violence, wants this type of violence. I don't think Donald Trump wants this type of violence against his opponent. That's exactly what's happening to him when you talk about what's going on in the justice system and the targeting of Donald Trump. So I guarantee that he probably doesn't want it necessarily to happen. I know he doesn't want it to happen, literally. So there is a we involved on this. The hatred's coming from both sides. The only issue is when Donald Trump tweets it, it gets attention. But when everybody else that speaks for the Democratic Party, it's kind of pushed aside and said, oh, well, it's not the president, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter, because on the mass amount of number of violence that's against a political opponent, that doesn't matter. It's only about the one person when it comes to the Republican Party. And I think that's a little foolish to just dismiss across the board.
So, Robert, how then does President Biden cut through all of this noise? You know, you have people that believe and will say, you know, whatever Trump says is something that, oh, well, this is just Trump. Whether we agree with it or not, people like that he's brazen. They like that he's honest. How does President Biden cut through all of that and make his or hold his stake and get people actually enthusiastic about voting for him?
Well, it has to be a moral appeal to the center of America. Let's remember, we've had 18 presidents that there have been plots to assassinate them. 4 have been killed during these assassination plots, not to mention President Reagan, who was shot, Theodore Roosevelt, who was shot, and others who these attempts have been made on their lives. This is not something to joke about. This is not a fun and game situation. There was a situation just in last term where Brett Kavanaugh was nearly kidnapped by a deranged individual, the Supreme Court justice. We've had threats made against political figures on the state, local, and national level. So the idea that the leader of one of these groups is fomenting some of this unrest, I think that everybody needs to take a step back, and I think that's what we continue to see President Biden do, pushing for this moral soul of America. And when we talk about what happens when you lose that, we can look at Pakistan right now, where Imran Khan has been jailed, and we see the political system collapsing around that. You look at Cuba right now, where their political system has nearly collapsed. You look at Haiti right now, where political violence and the assassination of Jean-Pierre Moïse have resulted in a failed state, ostensibly, in one of our Caribbean neighbors. This happens around the world, and America's mistake is thinking that we can be different, thinking that we can embrace political violence, political separatism, political division, iconoclastism, as opposed to our founding principles and what is in our Constitution, which is that we have to have a government by, for, and of the people, not a government through tweets, not a government through truths and through memes. We have to get down to the fundamental issues of America, and sharing images that promote political violence benefits nobody. To what end is this done, other than a cheap laugh and high school jokes? And think about people who are motivated by these images, what they may do. So America's in a very wrought situation when American leadership is needed globally, and it's not a time to be governing through memes.
And Scottie, last question to you. Obviously, another big headline here was Trump selling Bibles for $60 and urging Americans to pray again. The New York Times headline this morning is how Donald Trump is infusing Christianity into his movement, ending rallies with a church-like ritual and casting his prosecutions as persecution. The former president is demanding new levels of devotion from Republicans. As you see it, what is right now the appeal to Christians that Donald Trump is making? How important are they to his reelection?
I think it's extremely important, especially when you have a White House that yesterday completely ignored the actual faith of Christianity. They tweeted out about the secular side, Easter, and also about transgender visibility day, but refused to actually acknowledge Jesus Christ himself, which is the core principle of Christianity. So obviously there's a reason why overwhelming evangelicals flock not only to Republicans and conservatives, but definitely to Donald Trump at this point. But I think all of this is a distraction from the main issue that was dealing with last week, which was the fact that Donald Trump was attending the funeral of a slain police officer while the visitation of it, while on the other side of town you had 3 presidents meeting to entertain with Stephen Colbert on the Rockette stage. I think that's why we're talking about this, rather than what the image is to everyday Americans right now about who actually cares about their safety, who cares about those that are on the front lines versus those who are just there raising dollars and doing this for campaign contributions. That was the real issue that came out. And yet here we're talking about all these other sides, which we have to do because we're in the business of it. But let's not distract from the core issue and why Donald Trump continues to appeal not only to evangelicals, but to most Americans at this point.
All right, Scottie Nell Hughes, political commentator and strategist, and former Trump surrogate, and Robert Patillo, Democratic strategist. Thank you both for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.